The final destination for many Italians was the Isle of Man. They were fenced in with barbed wire and patrolled by armed guards, interned in parades of Victorian guest houses.
Almost all of the Italians who were interned had done nothing more threatening to national security than to introduce the British to ice cream, olive oil and coffee you could actually drink. George Orwell complained that you couldn't get a decent meal in London because the head chefs of the Savoy, the Café Royal and the Piccadilly had all been locked up.
But it wasn't just Italians. Over 10,000 men and women of Italian, German and Austrian origin were interned here.
One refugee said, "Put Viennese people together for long enough and they will do two things: found a university and open a patisserie." And that's just what they did here. There were cake shops, there were language lessons in French, Portuguese, Hebrew and Italian, lectures in history and literature, workshops from great Berlin theatre directors. For a short period of time, one of the great centres of European intellectual life was the Isle of Man.
By now, the Luftwaffe was preparing for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. Stage 1, destroy the RAF. On the 16th of August, 1940, Winston Churchill and his Chief of Staff, General Hastings Ismay, stopped off here at RAF Uxbridge on their way to Chequers. This was 11 Group HQ Fighter Command, responsible for air defence in the southeast of England.
Churchill took every chance he could get to stomp down here and watch Fighter Command in action. Each day, as the battle in the sky developed, the German attacks were plotted almost minute by minute on this giant map board.
The formations of attacking aircraft were shown by wooden blocks marked with the approximate number of planes. Their course was tracked by colour-coded arrows corresponding to the room's master clock.
116, S sugar 3585 east.
Now, it looks very complicated, but in fact this was a masterpiece of clarity. It's a dusty old room now, but this is really about information processing, and the truth is, we were better at it than they were.
Plotting the enemy attacks day and night were members of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, or WAAFs. They were known as the Beauty Chorus. Above them was what Churchill called the dress circle.
And up here, the senior commanders were playing a deadly game of chess, with the Germans taking split-second decisions about when to send squadrons up to fight. Timing was critical. Fights in the air were won by a narrow margin of advantage. So getting clear of the ground and up to the correct height for battle could mean the difference between life and death. By August 1940, squadrons could be scrambled and in the air within 90 seconds.
This beautifully efficient system was masterminded by the head of Fighter Command, Sir Hugh Dowding, also known as Stuffy.
If a democracy has any advantage in fighting a war, it's that some people are prepared to take on and challenge the supreme leaders. Stuffy Dowding was exactly the kind of stubborn, flinty old so-and-so, quite prepared to challenge Churchill at key moments. He'd built up fighter command almost from nothing in the 1930s and was fiercely protective of his men and machines. This entirely novel command and control system was his idea. They called it Dowding's system. Now, there was only one question. Would it work?
At 1700 hours on the day of Churchill and Ismay's visit, radar detected 100 enemy aircraft crossing the south coast. Their target, the airfields of Fighter Command.
RAF squadrons were scrambled immediately. As he watched the attacks building up on the plotting table, General Ismay, a grizzled old army hand, said he felt sick with fear. But the attacks intensified. It seemed as if the RAF had nothing left in reserve, and Churchill became absorbed by the drama.
22 British aircraft were shot down that day, 8 pilots lost. But 72 enemy aircraft were destroyed. Dowding's system was keeping the Luftwaffe at bay, and the legend of the Battle of Britain was born.
As Churchill continued his journey to Chequers with General Ismay, he said, "Don't talk to me. I have never been so moved." But a few moments later, Churchill himself broke the silence. Never in the field of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few. Later that evening, when he got home, the general quoted those words to his wife, and 4 days later, in a morale-boosting speech to the House of Commons, Churchill himself used them again.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. All our hearts go out to the fighter pilots whose brilliant...
Churchill needed good words. His own position was hardly secure. One British reaction to defeat in Europe was a shift to the left, even in the strangest places. This is Hastily Park, West London. Left-wing guerrillas are in action. They're led by a revolutionary called Tom Wintringham, a veteran of the international brigades in the Spanish Civil War.
Here at Hastily Park, Wintringham used his Spanish experience to build a volunteer fighting force to confront the Nazis when they arrived in England.
Britain was hopelessly unprepared. Most of the army's equipment had been left behind at Dunkirk. There were just 463 tanks in the whole country. Hitler had thousands at his disposal. How would we fight back?
We want large numbers of men in Great Britain.
On the 14th of May 1940, the Secretary of State for War, Anthony Eden, broadcast an appeal for volunteers. In the next 24 hours, 250,000 men came forward.
Colonel Montmorency, who was in Calcutta in '92, emerged from his retirement for the war. He wasn't very pleased with all he heard and all he saw, but whatever he felt, he tightened his belt and organized a corps. Poor Colonel Montmorency.
To begin with, they didn't have weapons and they didn't have uniforms. Most marched with golf clubs, pickaxe handles, guns they'd carved out of wood, even pikes.